Welcome to the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. I'm Eric Charlson.
Wow, this is a great way to climb mountains and come down,
For our reception, our Vulcan buddies brought acid.
I was dropping in and snaking people and causing shit.
I remember calling on the radio and I'm like, Brushy, where are you?
Greg would do the tricks. He was kind of like the Tony Hawk of snowboarding.
I mean, people just really gravitated to the backcountry.
I liked Greg, but he didn't really care for me too much because I was a little shithead.
Our guest this week is Dave Downing.
Hi, this is Dave.
Dave's Spartan Stomping Grounds is representative of the incredibly well-rounded professional snowboarder he was in 1996. There are deep Japanese pow turns, surfing shots, park, pipe, and cliff shots, all of which are smooth and styling. Dave still works for Burton Snowboards and is basically Jake's right-hand man. I caught up with him a few weeks ago as he returned from Vermont.
Yeah, I just got back last night. Big week back there, a sales meeting and some retailers in town, and we have that like big fall bash thing at Jake's house. The first board I ever rode was actually a GNS Mike Ranquet, and that was a beat up rental. That was the first board I ever rode, probably. That was in 1990. Like a month later, I bought a board, and that board was a Craig Kelly, like the purple one, purple and purple or whatever it was. So that was my first board I bought.
So
yeah.
You, within a couple of years of starting, had a pro career with Burton. Is that right? Or was it with Sims first?
No Sims. So it's a little confusing. You want me to start kind of telling my story? So 1990, I was working at a surf shop, and I was trying to be a pro surfer, and that wasn't really working out. And I was also going to school, trying to be a fireman. I went on a ski trip, broke my skis, and my friend talked me into snowboarding. And I just fell in love with it right off the bat. I didn't want to do it, and then he talked me into doing it. And I came back from that trip, bought a snowboard, and just got totally into it. And I started working within a few months, started working for the rep here in California, the Burton rep. So I was working at the shop, and I was also a sub rep for Burton for like 3 years. I would go to sales meetings at Burton, and I was doing everything for Burton as a rep. And I met Eric Koch, who was the team manager, and he was kind of my age, 23 at the time. Just started snowboarding up at Bear Mountain a lot. Eric asked me to go on a trip to Europe. I think it was Cersei Wallace blew her knee out, and she was going on this trip for Transworld. And he called me. He's like, "We need somebody to go to Europe in 2 days or whatever it was. Can you go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so I went, and that was kind of the beginning of everything, really. I met my wife, Shannon, who was Shannon Dunn at the time. I met her. I met Jeff Curtis on that trip. And it was me and Brian Thien, who was my buddy from Big Bear. We went and shot photos for Transworld on that trip. I came back. I had a cover of a magazine, all these photos in the magazine. That was the beginning of it. It wasn't something I even wanted to do or I was even looking at as an opportunity or anything. I always tell people it's just God just put that right in my lap because I had no idea what was going on.
How quick into it were you filming with the Hatchet Brothers?
So that was the next year, basically. So I came back from that trip and was selling the Burton line in Las Vegas at the trade show at the time. That was in March. Right after that, that's kind of right when I started dating Shannon, and then she wanted me to come to Utah, so I went to Utah, and she was filming actually for Mack Dawg. She was trying to film a part, and she's like, "Oh, can my friend Dave come out and hang out with Mack Dawg?" And he's totally harsh. He's like, "No, he can't come out with me, but he can go out with my other filmer, with Kurt Heine, and there's this new kid that we're trying to film with, this kid Peter." So it was me and Peter Line went out and started filming together in Utah with Kurt Heine for 3 days, and I had no idea what I was doing, but Kurt and I and Peter were just building jumps and just hitting these jumps in Utah. And then Kurt was all stoked and talked to Mack Dawg. And Mack Dawg was there, and then we switched groups the next day, 3 days later or whatever it was, and I went out with Mack Dawg and started hitting jumps with him and filming, and he was all stoked, and he asked me to start filming for TV3. I remember going to Tahoe, and I went to Squaw, and Mike was filming up at the Palisades at Squaw with Tex Davenport, and I was just in shock. I couldn't believe what Tex was doing, and he was just so gnarly. He was just hiking up with headphones on and jumping off cliffs, and the whole filming experience was totally new to me, So I just tried to get in there as best I could, and that's how it happened. That was the thing back then. All through the 90s, really. The 90s was that video era and the magazine era, really, where you could have a career and you could be marketable by doing that. That was your platform, was filming a video part and getting magazines. Now it's a lot more about contests and things like that, or Instagram or whatever the thing. That's your platform,
Totally.
But back then it was VHS tapes, it was like, that's how people got to see what was going on in snowboarding. I think snowboarders just watch stuff on the internet, to get stoked or whatever. So TB3, I was still a rep. Like, I was still working for Burton. That's the same year that The Garden came out. I was in that movie too, because I was friends with like Richard Wolcott and those guys at Volcom. They just started Volcom, and that's when I was like, I'm not going to be a rep anymore. And I signed a contract to be a team rider for Burton. And I moved to Utah that following winter in the fall. I lived at Tina Bassage's house. I rented a room from her, and I lived for the winter in Utah for the next 5 years probably. I lived at the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon at Tina's house. I mean, I was a surfer kid from Big Bear, and when I was working with Burton, I met Craig, and Craig became a friend of mine, and, that was a big influence on my life to go learn about the backcountry and go get into it. So I went to Utah, and that's where I started learning everything, just getting my feet wet. And that was the year that I filmed, that was TB4. Everything in that part was in Utah. That was an epic winter, 94, I think.
I asked if they were accessing the backcountry with sleds back then.
It was all hiking, though. That was way before sledding. I don't even think people snowmobiles at all, Just take up a lift and hike for 20 minutes and then ride down and then kind of be in a bowl, and we just hike around. And Mike Hatchett would come out there, and we would just film, I mean, I was dating Shannon and Tina were always going off to halftime contests and stuff, and I was just I'm staying here. And I remember it's just epic winter in Utah, really, really good. So that was that TB4 year. So I can just kind of go by movies because that's how I kind of remember it. Mm-hmm. TB5 was me and Johan filmed a lot together that year, and that was TB5, and that was my first trip I went to Alaska, first trip Johan went to Alaska.
That was a big deal.
That was a big year, yeah. And that was another one of those just pretty naive experiences, me and Johan, never been there before. We didn't know what we were doing really at all. Especially Johan, he had no idea what he was doing. He was just instinctively shredding, everything he did that trip was just totally off of instinct, which is pretty cool. Because it was me, Johan, Victoria, and Mike Hatchett in one heli. Mm-hmm. And the other heli was Tex Davenport, Goodwill, Noah Slasnick, and Tom Burt, the heavy crew over there. And we just didn't even know what we were doing. We were like, oh yeah, let's go over there. And Mike was helping us out, taking lines out and stuff. And I remember it was just crazy.
What would that trip like that be like? Would Mike point out something and say, can one of you do this?
He's been there for years at that point,
Mm-hmm.
So he's a pretty awesome and intense individual where he's just let's go film. And we'd film all morning. We'd pick out a thing, or we'd be flying around. We'd take Polaroids of a mountain, and we'd land, and we'd discuss what was going to happen. I'm going to try to do that line there and come down there. And we'd talk with Mike about it. And he's like, okay, cool. And then he'd fly over to another peak and land and take his camera gear. And then the heli would come get us and take us to the top of this peak and drop us off, sometimes with a guide and sometimes without a guide, And then it was just radio contact with Mike, and it's all right, and you're trying to memorize your line off this Polaroid, I've only been snowboarding at that point 4 years maybe, and it was pretty crazy to try to film lines, because it's one thing to ride a line and do it, but when you're trying to film it, Mike taught us, you got to rip it top to bottom, or it's not going to make the movie, and at that time he's filming 16 millimeter film, so every time he pushes that button, it's money falling out of that camera, because it costs money for it, it's not digital,
And was Burton putting any pressure on you to get stuff done? What was it like being a A-list?
It wasn't
Burton
really
rider?
pressure. It wasn't really pressure. It was just, that was kind of the heyday, right? So it was there was no real budgets. We was just oh, Dave, you're going to go to Alaska with, Mike Hatchett, and we'd go there for 3 weeks or whatever. That first year when Johan went and we went there, like I said, totally naive. We didn't know what we were doing. And we flew, I think it was 14 days straight with no down days. And it was epic every day. And then we thought that's just how it was. So we came back from that trip so stoked, freaking out, and that was that TB5 year. And then been back since then, and it's not like that. Sometimes you're sitting in a hotel room for a week and you get to fly one day or whatever. But that first year we went, it was Bluebird for like 14 days, and it was just epic. Mike was the guy, and Dave Hatchett too, and Tom Burt and Noah and all the riders. You know, they were teaching me, you know, as I was going, kind of thing.
I remember seeing you stand up on the surfboard snowboarding.
Yeah, we did that behind Mike's house in Tahoe. It just was like a joke, because it was like, I'm all, dude, look at the surfboard in your garage. I'm like, go ride that thing. And next thing you know, I'm like trying to ride this surfboard in the snow, which is pretty fun. But I guess that was part of my thing, was that I was a surfer. I don't know.
It doesn't seem like that many people just started snowboarding and that was their first thing that they ever did.
It was a lot of skate influence and stuff, for sure. It was the board sports industry, you know. So
yeah, we wanted to distance ourselves from skiing, it felt like. Like, remember those Vegas shows? And they would, like, put the snowboarders in, like, a different hall just to keep everything separated.
I was just talking to Donna Carpenter the other day, and she was telling me stories about, like, the first SIA show they went to. Like, her and Jake, like, had to, like, sneak in, and it was full drama. Like, they were getting kicked out, and they, like, snuck in with this guy that, like, tuned skis. He, like, put their boards, like, in his booth and stuff. And, like, it was just crazy.
We talked about how many of the early snowboarders made it tough for resort operators to keep them in check.
You know, I'm from Big Bear, and that's what happened in the early 90s, 90 to 93. That's where Bear Mountain had that outlaw park. It was called Outlaw Park because it was snowboarding only. Like, it was like, stay over there, you know? It was like, dude, that's what it was, dude. It was like full outlaws over there. Snowboarders are just thrashing around looking for stuff to bonk and shred on, you know, and skiers are just going down the fall line. So there's definitely a different mentality. You know, even though you're riding the same lifts, it's like, man, when a snowboarder goes down the hill, they're looking at it totally different than a skier. There's definitely going to be some conflict there. I mean, skiers want different things, and unfortunately, it's my opinion, but snowboard parks have turned into skier parks. I mean, dude, there's flags there. Everything's fall line. There's not a lot of creativity. There's not a lot of training. There's not a lot of turning and back and forth. They're all the same, you know. I think that's a big thing, you know. Like, if you go to Bear Mountain, it's just, there's stuff everywhere. I mean, snowboarders are designing that stuff, you know. It's like all over the place. There's tranny everywhere, and it's a different thing. It's like a skateboard mentality, you know. Mount
Seymour has that up here in Vancouver.
Yeah, right.
Whereas, you know, there's 2 other local mountains here, and they don't get that. Can we talk specifically about Craig Kelly for a quick minute?
Sure, I'd love to.
So where was he at with Burton at the time that you joined as a rep and then as you became a team rider?
Oh, yeah. So that's a crazy one, right? So, yeah, I was a rep, and I was selling his boards, and he was a team rider. But at that time, he was definitely bailed on the competition scene, and he was free riding a lot. There was a period of time there in the 90s where he was just like off the grid. You wouldn't even see footage of him. He was just like, didn't even want to be in front of the camera. He was just doing it for the love of it, really, you know, which was awesome. He was super involved in product the whole time. Yeah, and then I got to go on some awesome trips with him in the late 90s, you know. One trip we were in a yurt up at North Cascade Heli. We were there for like 10 days, and we got snowed in. And that was where I got him into splitboarding, because he was like kind of resistant to it, and I was doing it for a few years, and then he got into it. Me and him were like splitboarding, and Joe Curtis was with us, and he didn't have a splitboard. He was like snowshoeing. He was so bummed.
I've been that guy. That's funny that Craig would have been resistant to it at first. Why?
He was really into like his way, like the snowboards he was kind of developing for riding powder, you know, and then the splitboard, he didn't think it would work that good. And then once he started riding them, he just got into it, you know. He just found that, dude, that's just the way he wanted to travel, I think, in the backcountry. And it just totally fit his deal, you know, just being in the mountains and traveling around the mountains on his own free will, you know. But I went on a couple of awesome heli trips with him, which was amazing. Dude, that guy, he was it was funny, he was such a hard worker, but he would always be like, hey, we're not taking at least 3 free runs a day, we're just faking it. I remember him saying that all the time. He was just like, so we'd take free runs. He'd make Jeff Curtis like leave his camera pack in the heli, and we'd just take like 3 free runs. And then the next run, he'd be like, all right, Jeff, get your pack. And it was just like full work mode. Like every 10 feet of the run, he would just milk it. Like, okay, Jeff, pull over there. Okay, I'm gonna do a toe turn on that little spine, and then I'm gonna stop, and then, you know, and like, yeah. I mean, he's real, you know. He didn't want to just make it. Yeah. He didn't want to just milk powder turns and just for the cameras without it being real. So like, yeah, he would milk a run and like get all his work done. Then the next run, he'd just flow top to bottom and just every time.
Most people don't know how incredibly boring filming can be, and how
he taught me.
patient
He
you have to
taught
be.
me how to do that. He taught me how to like get a pow shot and like do it right, not just go down and like slide sideways and make spray, but like to actually turn and do a good turn and make it look good. And you know, like, because he wanted snowboarding to look good. Like if somebody's shooting a photo of him, it was like business, you know. I mean, he'd be like faxing the, you know, product managers at Burton and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you doing? He was just like, you know, writing this feedback thing on a fax, and he'd like fax it from some weird lodge in Canada or something, you know. Like, it was pretty cool. Like, he was definitely, and that was before cell phones, and that was before anything really. He was kind of an engineer in his brain, you know, like, and he was just always like in the product, you know. Boots. He was super opinionated. Bindings and boards and outerwear and backpacks, and he was into it, you know. Craig and I's relationship was interesting because he was like this hero of mine, you know. At first, you know, I was a rep, I was just this kid, and he was just this hero. And then over time, he like became a friend of mine, and I'm on trips with him and stuff, you know. And we would surf in the summer, and like, you know, we became good friends. It was awesome. It was just a weird transition, you know, going from like your hero, the next thing you know, he's like your friend of yours. I had to like pinch myself sometimes. I'm like, I'm on a heli trip with Craig Kelly, dude. This is crazy, you know. Like, I was just like a sponge, honestly. And now I look back on it, I was totally just sponging off of Craig and how he acted and how he, you know, dealt with people and how he snowboarded and how he worked with a guide and a photographer and a filmer and all those things, you know. Yeah, he did it right for sure. You know, he created it. He created the whole professional snowboarding thing, really.
Yeah, and he didn't do it with a giant ego or some ulterior motive. So when did you get married to Shannon?
99.
Shannon Downing was Shannon Dunn before they got married. She had the First Ladies Pro Model on Sims, and she rips. Dave and Shannon have 2 kids.
Logan's 13 and Dylan's 11. And they're both goofy foot, I'm proud to say. They love it. They surf a lot. They snowboard. They love it. Love both of it.
I asked Dave if he also had a skateboarding background.
You know, I skated a little bit. I wasn't like a skater, though. I skateboarded my whole life when I was a kid, but I was just kind of for fun, you know, like it wasn't like I was a skater. I was definitely more of like a surfer. And then the whole like jibbing thing that came about because I was hanging out in Big Bear, you know, with Brian Thien and Brian Gucci and these guys, and they influenced me in that aspect and the whole freestyle thing. And then I met JP and Jeremy Jones in Utah, so they really influenced me too, like on that whole thing. So I was being influenced by all those guys, those skate influenced dudes, and then I was also like, you know, hanging out with Noah Slasnick and Craig Kelly and stuff. So I had like kind of best of both mentors in my pocket, you know. And at that time it was important. That was something Craig kind of helped me figure out, was to be well-rounded, you know. Like he was being well-rounded in his career by being a racer and a half-pipe guy and a free rider and all these different aspects of his career. And in my era, it was about being able to ride the half-pipe. Like I'd go to the U.S. Open. I could make the finals with the U.S. Open. And I could go film with Mike Hatchett in Alaska, and I could go with Mack Dawg and go on a handrail trip. That was like what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to hang in all those environments, you know, like not in like a weird, like cocky way, but like I just wanted to be able to do all of it because I thought it was all awesome. I was like, I wanted to go to half-pipe contest, you know, and I wanted to go film in the streets with Jeff Anderson or JP Walker or whatever. I wanted to be able to do that. And I wanted to go to Alaska with Tom Burton, Noah Slasnick, and I just wanted to field jumps with Kevin Jones, and I wanted to do it all. Good surfers want to be well-rounded. A good surfer in their brain, they want to be able to surf 2-foot Huntington Beach, and they want to be able to go to Hawaii and surf Pipeline.
Sure.
And they want to be able to go to J Bay and surf that. You know, it's like a well-rounded thing, you know? You can't just be good at one thing. I think the surf background in me kind of helped me with that well-roundedness. I'm a little critical, like when I watch snowboarding, like I'll watch snowboarding and I'm like, well, that was pretty sick, but like he was just doing hockey stops halfway down the hill. He wasn't turning, and like from riding with Craig and being a surfer and flowing and turning and from top to bottom is a big thing to me. Like every turn should be like a proper turn, not like just the scrubbing of speed, but actual turn. I don't know. It's hard for me to explain it, but when I see Terrier snowboard or I see Nicholas Mueller snowboard, I'm like, they are flowing. It's flow. It's like, that's just how you do it to me, you know? It's kind of a lost art, I think, you know? Like, it really is. But there's guys that get it. Like Luis, like, he is insane. Like, not just on handrails, but he is unbelievable, like, as a snowboarder. Like, he could go to Alaska and he would flow. I know he would. Like, everything he does, you know, if he rides the park, if he rides the ski resort, he just has it, you know?
Yeah.
Flow.
Yeah. How often do you get out these days?
I snowboard quite a bit, actually. Like, I work with Burton with sales and stuff, so I'm out in the hill quite a bit. Probably get in 50 days a year. Yeah, I've never counted my days, but Jake's all into that, counting days. I've never been into that. But I'll bet it's 50 days or something like that.
That's awesome. So you're really close with Jake, obviously.
Yeah, I've known him for quite a while. 27 years. You know, he's not really, like, in the day-to-day stuff, I know, in the last few years, but definitely over the years, yeah, it's been a great relationship, you know. He's always been pretty good about listening and caring, and he's a snowboarder, man. He's a frothing snowboarder when it comes down to it, and that's what I like about him. Like that thing, like, well, I was telling you about Craig, like taking 3 runs on a film trip, you know, like that's what Jake does. That's exactly what he does. Half his meetings he has is on the chairlift. I mean, he'll tell people, like, okay, we'll have a meeting. Okay, meet me at Stowe at, like, 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever. He's not going to sit in an office and have a meeting usually. He'd rather do it on the chairlift.
Health-wise, he's doing better now?
Yeah, I just saw him the other day in Vermont. He's doing good. He went surfing this summer, and he's been hiking a lot. He can snowboard, and he's getting better every day, he said. So I hope to see him make a full 100% recovery. He's not still, like, 100% at all, but he's definitely doing really good.
I saw an Instagram post this week of a dude who said he was waiting for first chair at Stowe when Jake comes riding up after hiking up before the mountain opens. That's fucking rad.
Digging into my past and bringing up memories is pretty cool. Like, I'm just really fortunate and blessed that I was able to do that, you know. Really, it's a pretty selfish life I lived for 14 years or whatever, but I'm glad I got to do it, you know. Every day I could get up and go wherever I wanted and go, you know, explore the backcountry. That's another big part of what I really enjoyed about my career was being able to explore places and find places for the first time and go on, you know, 2 or 3 day, like, recon missions with Dave Hatchett and Tahoe and just find these places that people have been filming on, but that we found those places, you know.
We talked about where snowboarding progression would go next.
I think it's up to the riders, you know, like the people that are on the forefront of it are going to change the sport. They're either going to just keep doing what everybody else is doing and just keep adding another cork and jumping off that fall line jump and just doing it, or they're going to rebel and they're going to find their own path and create something new. You know, because that's what we did. I mean, we were just, like, finding it, you know, just as a group of people, we're just doing it. And I think that's going to happen again at some point. I'm a big fan of surfing, like, you know, the WSL and the way it is, the packages that they have. It's a very legit thing. Snowboarding doesn't really have that. There's no world champion. There's no format. There's no drama. Like, I couldn't imagine commentating, like, a slopestyle contest. I'd just be like, what do you talk about? I know what this guy's going to do. He's going to do a backflip on the rail. He's going to do a frontside 5, and he's going to do a double cork 1080. He's going to do a switch step. You know, like, it's just, there's not a lot to talk about. There's, like, professional snowboarding, and then there's the actual sport of snowboarding. 90% of the people, they just go to the mountains and they want to have an awesome day with friends. I mean, it's pretty simple. They go up the lift and they come down and they're stoked and they go get a hamburger. They're not thinking about what, you know, what pro people think about, like progression and tricks and doing a trick that nobody else has done or all that kind of stuff. And I hope that part still progresses because it's fun to watch. I just watched the snowboarding movie and it's really cool. Any good snowboarder wants to show people what they can do. And whether that's on film or on at a contest or whatever, they want to show people what they got, right? Like how talented they are, what new thing they got going on, you know. Right. But then there's some snowboarding that happens with no audience, you know, and sometimes that's the best snowboarding that ever happens, you know. Yeah, I've definitely seen the best snowboarding in my life with no audience. I've seen Johan with no cameras on him. It's pretty crazy. The Craig Kelly thing was awesome, and then riding with Johan. Now I look back on it now, I'm like, I'm really glad I got to experience that and see it with my own eyes, you know, because that was incredible. Yeah, he didn't even care about filming, dude. He was just like, I mean, shooting Johan was like shooting wildlife. It was just like, you hoped you got a shot of Johan because he wasn't going to wait for the camera. He just was going to go. Pretty rad.
Thanks so much for talking to me, dude.
Cool, Eric. All right, have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you bet. Hopefully we get to ride together at some point. FNRad shoutouts to Dave Downing for doing an interview this week. This episode marks the halfway point of our regular second season, and we've got some more great interviews coming up. So be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast, brought to you by BR Productions.